countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
General Matey!
We have stolen a small Imperial shuttle, disguised as a Star Wars movie review, and using a Darth Vader comic series. A strike team will land on podcasting services and bring more Star Wars fans under the comic book tent.
Sounds dangerous. I wonder who they got to pull that off.
General Larson, is your strike team assembled?
The comic book's ready. I don't have a command crew for the podcast. No, I knew it was going to be rough, pal. I didn't want to speak for you. That's one.
Host with the most, count me in.
I'm with you too. Wait, I'm with you too. Wait, I'm with you too.
Oh man, what a great start! That's
Two. Here,
does that mean we get Bono and The Edge
That's
and
right.
Larry
And
Clayton?
the other guys?
I too am
Bono
with you.
and The Edge and Carl and Rick.
Oh, welcome back to the last comic shop in the beginning of Movie Mayhem. May the 4th be with you. I think a couple days earlier than what it was. But in any case, yeah, it's all Star Wars this week. May the 4th is this week. It is official Star Wars Day, and I'm the host with the most, Danny Larson, a huge Star Wars fan, and I'm joined by two of my favorite folks to talk Star Wars with. That's my cousin J.A. Scott. J.A., favorite Star Wars character, still Han Solo, even after all these years?
Oh yeah, still Han Solo. Or Han Solo.
Han. You say Han or Han?
It's Han.
Not if you're Lando.
Right, Lando says it wrong. Yeah.
It's only his best friend.
I've also got Mikey Wood on today's program, another huge Star Wars fan. Mikey,
Yeah.
favorite Star Wars character?
Oh, heck. Pop Blue the Ewok. No, I don't know. Honestly, you know what? Like old school before they screwed it up, Boba Fett. When he was just that mysterious guy who nodded his head twice and had like 10 lines of dialogue. He was badass. Like when we were kids, like he was like the thing.
Oh yeah, that action figure was like the
Yeah.
bee's knees.
Yeah,
Like I don't
he
know.
wasn't the clone. He wasn't any of that nonsense. He was just super cool.
So you're essentially a Jason Wingreen Boba Fett.
Oh man, they had a name for him too. They I remember the first time they ever showed Boba Fett without a helmet on, it was actually card art in Star Wars cards.
Yeah, him and Snake Eyes would just fight for supremacy on who was the coolest guy on the playground.
So,
Any case,
you're
some guy that likes G.I. Joe and not so much Star Wars is Chad Smith. But Chad, we like to have you on these shows.
Oh, thanks, pal.
I don't know, be that guy that's like not so fan wanky, I guess.
There you go. You found one.
What, do you have a favorite Star Wars character?
I like the Rancor handler guy, the guy without the
Yes.
shirt and the big fat hat.
That's right.
Because I was able to use him for Kingpin customs and old school Brian Bendis before he lost all the weight.
Oh, Lordy, sounds
That's right.
good.
There was like the kids at home, they don't know this, but there was this window of time for us old people where after Return of the Jedi, there was nothing. We had nothing except for two
that's-
Ewok TV movies.
No, we had the Droids cartoon
Droids
show.
cartoon.
The Droids
Right.
cartoon show isn't that terrible.
The Droids cartoon is awesome, actually.
See?
It's one of my favorite things. Yeah, but for a while there was precious little until Dark Horse started publishing comics again in the early 90s. And that's not what we're talking about tonight.
No, it's not, but we are talking about comic books. As you may know, during Movie Mayhem, we always like to pair a comic book and a movie that's either adapted from that comic book or involves the characters from that comic book. So, long story short, I really have wanted for a really long time to read the Darth Vader series, the original one that came out right after Marvel got the license back. But luckily for us, also this year is the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi. So later on in this program, you're going to get our review of Return of the Jedi 40 years too late.
It's the what anniversary of the special edition, which is the only one you can get these days.
Not true, and we'll talk about that when we
That's
get to
right.
it.
Oh, are we getting
Right.
specialized, despecialized? And
Oh.
there's a third one out there.
If you can find it. Yeah.
So let's get to that comic book review. We'd like to do that first on the show. So they call this Darth Vader Volume 1. Because, again, I don't think there was a Darth Vader comic book at Dark Horse, or I know there was definitely not one in the Marvel when they had the original license back in the 80s. But who did this one, Chad?
Well, this book was written by Kieran Gillen, with art from Salvador Larroca. Edgar Delgado was the colorist, and you had VC's Joe Caramagna on letters.
Yes. We're only doing volume 1, so it's the first 6 issues of this series. Before we get into the 10-cent synopsis, one of the best things about this series, if you've never read it, is it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I think it runs 25 issues in total. It's a complete story, and it happens between New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. So the Death Star is just blown up and everything, but I'm not going to get too much into the 10-cent synopsis. That's J.A.'s job. So J.A., what happens in the first 6 issues of this Darth Vader series?
Well, it'll be an 8-cent synopsis because you already gave 2 cents away. I was going to lead with that this takes place right after the destruction of the first Death Star. The Emperor essentially blames Darth Vader for allowing the Death Star to blow up and sort of also notes, well, you got away, so I guess it worked out for you.
It was an inside job.
So Vader is very much on a down trowel in the eyes of the Emperor, while General Tog is being elevated and is pushing the fleet, which is, that sort of reminds me of some of the things they played with Rebels. Similar to General Thrawn's TIE Defenders, fleet is better than one giant, massive boondoggle of a military expense that has a tiny little exhaust port. There's no way a station that big could have such a small exhaust port. Okay,
I don't know, man. I'm a pretty big guy, and my exhaust port's pretty small.
In any case, so they blame Darth Vader for all of this,
right?
They
blame Darth Vader for that. So he is trying to get back into the Emperor's good graces, but at the same time, he's got this side hustle. He's trying to figure out the Force-sensitive starfighter pilot that blew up the Death Star, i.e. Luke. And to do that, he's flying around behind the Emperor's back in his old Naboo cruiser that him and Padme used to get it on in. And enlisting a droid army. So we get, some nice throwbacks to Geonosis. And this is also the first appearance of Dr. Aphra and the 2 murder bots. One is an astromech, one is a protocol droid.
Not just a protocol droid, but he knows all the languages and torture. And the other one, instead of being an astromech, is a blastomech. Designed for killing Bodak stuff.
Right. I mean, to paraphrase Roger Rabbit, I'm not bad. I was just programmed this way.
That's right.
Uh-huh. Or to quote the protocol droid, ha ha ha, you were on fire and also dead.
They are fabulous.
They are the breakout characters. It's really
fabulous.
hard for me to say whether or not Dr. Aphra, who I've read a lot of her books afterwards. She's not only now in comic books, but she's got novels out there. I'm waiting for her to appear in some sort of live action Disney. It's going to happen. Like it's just a matter of time. But it's either her or the murder droids. And that's the thing, and that's where I'm going to start off with my initial thoughts, is why I love this series so much is because Darth Vader is not a bad guy in this. He's an anti-hero, but he's not a bad guy. And they set that up from issue 1, because what do? They have Darth Vader kind of like saving the cat and fighting Jabba the Hutt in a situation where against a guy we know is a bad guy. And then from there, he's being picked on by the Emperor, another bad guy. He's on the other side of that. He has to take orders from some schmuck that was just one of those round tables. And then on top of that, they give him all of the anti-hero versions of Luke's friends, right? They give him his C-3PO. Mm-hmm. They give him an R2-D2. They give him a Wookiee in Black Chrysanthemum.
Yeah.
They even give him like a plucky female to hang out with in Dr. Aphra instead of like Leia.
She's so like Solo and Leia.
I was going to say, she dresses like Han Solo.
Right. I was going to say they also give him Boba Fett, who's kind of like his Han Solo. That mercenary guy.
You mean Han Solo?
Han Solo.
But in any case, that's why I love this book so much, because I love Darth Vader. I like Dr. Doom. He's one of my favorite characters in fiction, and I like rooting for him.
Right, a guy who destroyed Alderaan, a billion lives snuffed out.
That was Tarkin. He was just there.
Well, what's cool about the series is that it adds an extra layer to Vader. He's a bad guy, and then in Empire Strikes Back, you learn he's a bad guy with a secret. And then in Return of the Jedi, he is a bad guy who redeems himself, So there's this arc there, but this just adds like an extra layer to him where you almost see a little. I mean, it's not a lot. You said he's a good guy. He's not a good guy. He's the protagonist of this particular story, but he's still an evil person. They just do a really, really good job of giving him that extra layer without compromising what the character was before, because he shows up and people are terrified of him. I mean, and Aphra, even though she's a smartass and everything, she's terrified of him too. But she gives him a little bit of a what for, and he almost kind of respects it, sort of.
Yeah, I love that scene with Aphra. She's like, I know you're going to kill me, so when you do it, just go with the lightsaber to the neck.
Yeah.
I really don't want to be sucked out into space. That was cool. But no, I was going to mention too, Mikey, is one of the things they do really well with is whenever he has one of those pivotal decisions, they'll give you a flashback page with moments, from the movie trilogies, and they're mixing, the prequel trilogy as well as the regular movie trilogy, and all these different moments as Darth Vader is putting all these things together. And it really does help the audience to empathize for this guy. Where I just go back to Zangief in Wreck-It Ralph. He's like, just because we're bad guys doesn't mean we're bad guys.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And books like this almost make me like the prequels. Like they almost do.
Oh.
Yeah, well, they do have. I love those callbacks. Even in first issue when he's on Tatooine, he's talking to somebody and you don't know what's going on off camera, and then it tilts over. He's in the middle of a sand person camp that he's just obliterated. He still hates them. The Tusken Raiders get no love.
None.
I don't know. I feel like this is also taps into that whole notion of Darth Vader's a space gangster. It appeals to me in the same way that why I enjoyed watching The Sopranos, right? Tony Soprano was an asshole. Like, he was a terrible, terrible person. Like, kills people, whatever. But he's the protagonist of that show. And to Mikey's point, because they give him a little bit of the layering, because they put him against people that are genuinely even worse, it's hard to not to be like, okay, well, I'm going to root for this guy because at the very least, he's got the good one-liners. And I can get behind that. And that's the nice thing about this. Kieran Gillen really does allow Anakin to kind of bleed out to the surface more than you see in any other Darth Vader series. Like, it's more of like that cocky, kind of brash. It's tempered, but you can still see that kind of smart-ass Anakin underneath. I don't know, Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it was very light, and I'd be interested to see if they go into this in more detail, because I haven't read the entire run. But something that always intrigued me, which takes place in Return of the Jedi, is Vader trying to get Luke to convert and saying, you and I can destroy the Emperor, and you and I will then run the galaxy. Yeah. So the idea that Vader is always secretly scheming behind his master's back to get rid of his master, who is like, evil incarnate. That I always found fascinating. At one time, say, I'm going to save my son, but at the other time, but it's okay if we run the galaxy, then we can run the galaxy.
Honestly, I think it's a matter of like, that's the Sith way. In this book, it talks about how, Palpatine's plan has been running for 20 years to find replacements for Darth Vader. He's got this clone factory going on. If you're really the baddest bad guy, you'll be able to defeat those. But if not, I've got these clone guys.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the plotting and scheming. What I think Gillen does the best here is actually showing those sparks of humanity that Luke's able to pull out of him in Jedi. You don't really see a lot of evidence of that in the movies because Darth Vader's so busy being a badass the entire time. It's all just Luke kind of posturing and being hopeful, and you don't really see those sparks. But in here, because you have access to his inner monologue, you can see those moments that are turning him. You can see those cracks in the Sith facade, more so than any other adaptation I've seen with Darth Vader in it.
And there's a lot of stuff in there, too, that gives you the insight to the dynamic between Palpatine and Vader. And you almost feel bad for him because Palpatine is like just poking him and just abusing him. And he's like a lapdog to him. Because I remember being, when I was a kid, the Emperor shows up in Empire Strikes Back for like a projection, for a split second, and you're like, okay, he's pretty scary. And then he shows up in Return of the Jedi, and he's this evil old man that Vader bows to. And it's like, why? What is so awful about this? Because there was no background for him. We didn't know. He was just the Emperor, and he was evil. In this, you get a little bit of like he dangles Padme over him all the time, and he just eats away at him. And you learn that the suit is constantly painful and you feel bad for Anakin inside of that thing, because he's just in a constant state of agony, and he uses the dark side to sort of balance that. And it all comes down to that scene in the 6th book where he finds out Luke's name and has a silent tantrum, not really a tantrum, but you know what I mean? Like he has
a no moment, right? No.
Yeah, but without that.
without the no. Glass almost shatters.
He's furious at Palpatine. Like that's the moment that he decides that he is going to destroy that man right there.
Yeah, because he gave up everything. I mean, he gave up everything, and at the end of the day, Palpatine lied to him. In that moment, do you want to say something, Vader? And he's like, no, I just understand us for the first time ever. Yeah. Like you don't give a shit about me, and that's fine because I'll destroy you. I'm gonna get my son, and this is all gonna be mine, baby. All mine.
I'm gonna get my kid. We're gonna kick your ass. Yeah.
But let's go ahead and get to ratings, because I mean we have to get to that movie review in just a second. So J.A., what's our rating scale for these 6 issues of Vader?
1 out of 4 murder droids.
Ooh, I love those murder droids so much. They are the best.
They are the best. I'm going to go first by just giving this a 5 murder droids. This is the best Star Wars book I've ever read. From beginning to end. Like this series, these 25 issues is even better than the Jason Aaron Star Wars with the John Cassidy art that's running kind of concurrently. Go back to our last Comic Shop Archives. We did that show last year. This is a better series because you get the characters like the murder bots, because you get that arc with Darth Vader, because he's such an interesting protagonist. Good villains are always so interesting to read. And so you get that in spades in this particular book. So I can't gush about it enough, and I'm not going to. It is a 4, 5, 6, 7 best book ever. Period.
Cool.
J.A.
Yeah, I'm also going to give it 4 murder droids. It reminded me of the Timothy Zahn Star Wars series when there was nothing coming out, and then the Zahn novels hit, and it was like this massive breath of fresh air and a reimagining and a carrying on. I mean, for that, after Jedi, of the Star Wars legacy. This is, I think, the best of the new Star Wars stuff that came out after Marvel got the license and the Disney Star Wars. This is taking everything that people loved about Star Wars, but it's not just a pure nostalgia play. I like how they don't forget about the prequels, because one of my big issues with the sequels is that they sort of just said, we're going to take everything that we learned in the prequels and chuck it aside. And they haven't done that. They've been respectful of the prequels, which are also good movies. Good-ish movies. I don't know. My son loves them.
Chad, you're not a Star Wars fan. What do you give this?
Yeah, I mean, this is tough for me because I'll be honest, I kind of hate Star Wars. I feel like there were 3 great movies, and they've just been taking that franchise and regurgitating and recycling it ever since. With that said, in this book, we haven't mentioned the art at all. Like Sal Larroca was always like a pretty good artist. I feel like he levels up in this book. His stuff is fantastic. The story was great. It added nuance. It's one of the few times where Star Wars dipped back into the well, which they do all the time. And up until these Mandalorian shows and whatnot on Disney, it's been kind of rough. But they go back, they dip into the well, and they actually found ways to add things to make things better. So I'm going to give this a reluctant 4.
Oh, the Star Wars book in the year of Chad. All right, Mikey, finish us out. What do you say?
Yeah, it's a 4 too. And the other, what's neat about this one too, and it's a problem that I have with the Cassidy, the Star Wars proper series. There are stories that happen in that sort of contradict what happens in the movies. Like Luke Skywalker meeting up with Vader in Empire Strikes Back is actually, if you use the comics as canon, the second time they meet up. And that ruins the whole vibe of the Empire Strikes Back thing, because it's not the second time. That's the first time they see each other, and that's how it has to be. This book doesn't do that. There's nothing in there that contradicts anything that happens in the and he took good care to make sure that none of it does any of that. So it's just really, really well done. And it continues on, because I've read this whole series and the volume after it by Charles Soule. You know, the Vader series, they are all quality. Like, they're all really, really good. And this is a beautiful place to start. So.
All right, so a unanimous 4 to start off our Movie Mayhem show. We'll be right back after these commercial breaks with our review of Return of the Jedi. Will that get a full 4 out of 4 from all of us? We'll see. Stay tuned.
Do your hobbies include comic books, movies, television, and or video games?
Are you always behind with the latest news in the world of nerd?
Well, look no further than the Oblivion Bar, a nerd culture podcast.
Great Scott! Hosted by Chris Hacker and Aaron Knowles, the Oblivion Bar offers a weekly review of all the latest breaking news, in-depth discussions far beyond whether Han shot first, and newsletter section, where you, the listener, send in your questions to be answered live on the show.
New episodes every Monday, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts.
I'm just so freaking excited!
You can also find us on Twitter at Oblivion Bar Pod.
Come join us at the Oblivion Bar Podcast.
Hope to see you there.
It was supposed to be a day at the beach. But for 4 friends, one wrong road will put them on a direct course to being the main course. Her name is Grandma Hazel, a chainsaw-wielding psychopathic cannibal. A beast of the backwoods with a body count higher than a bowl of blood-spattered Scotchmans. From the creators of Hocus Pocus, Grandma Chainsaw. Evil has a perm.
And we're back, live from the forest moon of Endor. You can hear the squeaking in the distance. Those are just Ewoks getting their yub-nub on.
So I think Mikey was talking about his forest moon of Endor earlier.
That's right. I was.
You know, it is Yub-Nub. It is. I mean, anytime
Yub-Nub.
anybody says otherwise, no.
Yub-nubby choppy yub-yub. Yeah.
So we're back to talk Return of the Jedi. It's the 40th anniversary of the movie, originally coming out in the theater. Something that we will get into in a little bit. Unless you do some legwork, you cannot see as it was 40 years ago, which is not right, Disney. That's not right.
I know. I figured they've been waiting to release that and just make all the money. But Jay, help me out on this, because the original version that everybody saw in the theaters in the 80s, that's only available in like a select number of ways, and most of them are gone and defunct now, right?
Yeah, so if you want an official release of the way it was shown in the movie theater, you would need to either have a VHS copy or a Laserdisc copy, or it was also packaged on a DVD set they released in like 2006, I believe. But that was still not an anamorphic. It was a pan scan. So if you put it on a widescreen TV today, it's not going to look the same because it's still a 4:3 aspect ratio with letterboxing.
Those are the ones that I have. And the bummer is that the original cuts, even though they're the ones that I watch, it's also not remastered and things like that. So it's kind of cool. It looks a little grainy and it looks a little retro, you know.
There is hope for folks like you. Not legal hope, obviously. But I have some friends that are big Star Wars junkies, and they have talked to me about despecialized editions. J.A., what is the despecialized edition?
So this came out maybe almost 10 to 15 years ago now. This guy, Harmy, took the Blu-ray discs and essentially did movie magic with them using tools like After Effects and Adobe Premiere, and recut the movie so it appears like it was in the original. So essentially he took the master and then cut out all the specialization stuff, all the stuff they added in the 90s when they released specialized versions of the movie. So what that means is you get rid of the Jedi Rocks musical number at the beginning, the eyebrows come back for Anakin and when Luke takes his helmet off because the eyebrows were digitally erased.
Ooh.
Because, he went through a fire, and so his eyebrows would have burned off. And you get the old Anakin Force Ghost, not the Hayden Christensen Anakin Force Ghost, which makes no sense to me.
Yes!
Because
He instantly de-ages.
Since then, there's another outfit, and this is now considered sort of the gold standard. It's called Project 4K83. They took and did an 8K scan of a film. So they took a film, they took one of the Kodak films, and they scanned the film. And then they went through and they meticulously cleaned that scan. And now you can download and watch a 4K version of Return of the Jedi. You can also get that for Star Wars. Empire Strikes Back is in the cleaning stage right now.
Asterisk, you're not responsible if you go online and find these things. Just get yourselves into trouble.
Yes, can we put that disclaimer in here? We do not condone such actions. House of Mouse, please do not take us.
Until Disney and Lucasfilm puts out the originals, that's the closest you're going to get to watching it on today's standard big LED televisions in 4K resolution is finding these things.
Right. I can't believe Disney doesn't want that money.
No.
They would make all the monies. I guess maybe, or is it just a very small contingent of hardcore Star Wars nerds?
Yes, but still, they would still pay for it. Like,
Yeah.
Out the nose.
an official release. Like I would say the majority of people don't really know the difference or care for the difference. And there are actually people out there who prefer the special editions. I don't know why, but there are. That's the thing with Lucas, is that it's the story of a man who's more interested in the technology than in actually the story that he's telling. Really, and he just couldn't leave it alone. He just kept going back to it and going back to it and going back to it and going and changing things and tweaking things and making them worse.
But he's so adamant about those changes.
I'm kind of still hoping that he'll have this sort of Spielberg moment. Spielberg released 20 years ago, I guess now. It's been a while, maybe 30. He released the E.T. Special Edition where he got rid of the guns and replaced them with the flashlights and walkie-talkies, and he put in a CG E.T. And everyone hated it. And when he released that, by the way, you could, if you bought that disc, you could also still get the original version.
Yeah, it had both.
But since then, they've gone through 4K restorations, and the thing they just put out for IMAX this year, it's the original. He's essentially excised that from you can't buy that anymore. If you want to get that one with the ET with all the CGI stuff, you have to go to eBay. Spielberg says there was the biggest mistake he ever made, and he refuses to sell it.
Yeah, there you go. There's something to be said for art being of its time, and for good and for bad. You just need to embrace that.
Right. It's like the recoloring of comics. Right. We need and regardless, whether we watch the special edition, the original edition, the de-specialized edition, whatever, we watched Return of the Jedi for the 40th anniversary. Now, Mikey, who worked on this project?
Well, you remember all the people in Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah,
they're in this one too. Well, they are. So the cast returns. Harrison Ford, Luke Skywalker. All those people, and we get the wonderful Ian McDiarmid in as Palpatine for the first time. Don't let the special editions fool you. Palpatine in Empire Strikes Back was played by a woman in makeup. It was directed by Richard Marquand, who also directed a drama called Eye of the Needle. That's the only other thing I know. I
believe he was not part of SAG-AFTRA. So it wasn't SAG-AFTRA, sorry, that's Screen Actors Guild. It was the Directors Guild of America that Lucas and Spielberg were fighting with because he wanted Spielberg to direct it originally, but the DGA said no. And then he went after David Lynch and David Cronenberg. They also said no.
Oh,
can you imagine?
So that's why they got him, because he was not in the union.
Yeah, and it was written by Lawrence Kasdan, who also wrote Empire Strikes Back, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Did he write The Big Chill?
I believe he did.
Well, let's get to the 10-cent synopsis first, just in case you haven't seen Return of the Jedi. But believe it or not, there's probably people out there that
It
have
has 40 years.
I mean, whatever. I will say that this was one of the first movies I can remember seeing in the movie theaters because I saw it 4 times. Luke Skywalker was my boy, and the green lightsaber was my thing. And in this movie, Luke gets Darth Vader to get his groove back. That light side of the Force. Yes. Make sure that he throws the Palpatine down an elevator shaft or something. Regardless, Luke does what he was supposed to do, what it's been all building up to, which was redeem his father, because really his father was the only one that could whoop some Palpatine. Oh, wow. And there was supposed to be Wookiees. There were supposed to be Wookiees in this film. It was all supposed to happen on Kashyyyk. But then Lucas was like, man, they're never going to buy the Wookiees are primitive. Because we see, Chewbacca flying the Millennium Falcon and stuff. They're not going to buy this. So they came up with Ewoks, which I guess is okay. I just don't understand why they couldn't have both. You could have had, like, the Ewoks be, like, a more primitive tribe on Kashyyyk. They're freaking bear things. Why can't they have 2 races of bears on Kashyyyk?
Well, the other reason being, from what I understand, is that it was easier to find large numbers of people under 5 feet tall than it was to find people over 6.5 feet tall.
See, and they sell more toys. They're cute. Well, they sell more toys.
And honestly,
it's Baby Yoda. It's Baby Yoda in big furry.
People may say that they hate them, but I was 10 years old when that movie came out, and the Ewoks were awesome. We love the Ewoks.
The shiners come back on the Ewoks. I used to be like, it would have been so much better to see like a Wookiee rip arms off of a stormtrooper in the battle scene. It would have made more sense. Yeah, but at the same time, like, Ewoks.
Teddy bears.
Really, the angle could have been that Chewbacca is incredibly intelligent. I'm a human being, and I'm not a mechanic, so he could have just been really, really adept at that kind of stuff. But that's, either way, it was the Ewoks. They were wonderful.
I was going to ask you, Mikey, if there was one sequence from Return of the Jedi, which is your favorite, what would it be?
You know what? Honestly, I have a soft spot for the whole skiff scene. Lando falls into the pit and Han Solo's half blind and he's shooting around. And then, like, people seem to hate this part, but I loved it. Like, Boba Fett is this super badass and he just goes out like a clod.
Yeah, he gets America's Funniest Home Videos.
Yeah, and I loved it, though, because it just shows that literally anything can happen. So many people were so disappointed in that. But when I was a kid, I just thought it was hilarious. Like that whole build up, and then when Luke gives the little salute to R2 and the lightsaber shoots out of R2 and he does the whole Mark Spitz thing with the diving board, and it's just so good.
How many signals did Luke have time to give? What the heck was up with Jabba? He's like, Luke's signaling R2, he's doing this, he's winking over there, he's giving the handshakes here. And
Jabba was distracted by Leia.
I know, right? It's sad that Han Solo was blind while she was wearing that.
What say you, J.A.?
I mean, to go from the high, not only the high of the original series, probably the high of all of Star Wars for most people in Empire Strikes Back, to then come to Return of the Jedi, it felt a bit of a retread, something that we would get over and over again with the sequel trilogies. Another Death Star, another trench run. So those bits, I think, draw it back a bit. You were mentioning about the Wookiees. It would have been better if it had been Wookiees and not Ewoks, and they're not trying to sell toys. And by the way, those Ewoks, they're even more formidable than the Viet Cong. I think there was one Ewok death to a whole battalion of stormtroopers.
Man, those speeder bike guys would just bite it left and right.
They didn't care anymore. The stormtroopers couldn't see anything. They were like, "This hot as balls out here." We
only losers.
Oh, Lordy. Hey, and by the way, did the Ewoks eat them? I mean, do these murder bears flat out eat people? And they just did, because they were going to
roast Han Solo. That is a good point. They are cannibals.
That's not cannibalism.
Yeah, they're not eating their own kind. They're eating us. Like, they're bears.
They're adorable murder bears.
Right. They could be like, we're sandwiches to them. We just happened that, C-3PO was their golden god. And so they were like, yeah, fine, we won't eat you. But I guarantee that's where all those helmets came from. They're like, yummy, brains a whole.
I just like 3PO, like almost as an aside, is like, they're going to prepare you as a feast for me.
But they didn't eat Leia.
They liked Leia. She shared her banana or whatever it was.
I'm going to be a Star Wars nerd here for a second.
Just for a second?
Leia.
This whole episode hasn't been a Star Wars nerd?
Because they didn't eat Leia because Leia is force sensitive, although she may not know it. And she was able to, you know, that's what they say about the Forcey stuff. Like, you can commune with other life forms, right? That was the first one you saw in the theaters, right? Like me. Like, that was the first one you saw in the theaters was Return of the Jedi.
I do believe, yes. I saw all of them in the theaters because even when Return came out, they re-released the other ones originally in the theaters as well. So I saw Star Wars in its original, and I saw Empire in the theater. But in the original run, theatrical run, only Return of the Jedi.
And you don't like it?
It's not that I don't like it. I just think of the three, it's the weakest of the first three.
Chad?
Yeah, I will agree on that front, where this is where the Star Wars franchise shows its bones, where it just starts repeating stuff and just starts living off of prior conquests. And like Empire was such a high note, and then you get to this and it's fun, and it has that spirit of serialized storytelling where like you have your separate adventures, but it's a lot of repetition. It's a lot of just rehashing, which is what the Star Wars universe does ad nauseum in my mind. With that said, I enjoyed it. For years, I've been knocking this movie as the lesser of the trilogy. I don't know whether it was because in these modern times, I was watching it on my cell phone and had the smaller screen and the more intimate thing as opposed to the giant theatrical experience. But I enjoyed it. One clip at a time, 20 minutes here, half an hour there. I love the Ewoks. I've always loved the Ewoks. Even when people are like, oh, they should have been. No, they should have been Ewoks. They're adorable murder bears. Did all the things, I guess, that Star Wars movies are supposed to do. Was it a great movie? No, it wasn't. It wasn't a masterpiece. But it sure did sell a lot of toys. And for the 2 hours I was there with that movie, spaced out over, a couple of different sittings, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. As my final thoughts before we get into our ratings of Return of the Jedi, I am going to say that I prefer Return of the Jedi more than Star Wars. Yeah, New Hope. I do not like New Hope as much as I like Return of the Jedi. I like Empire Strikes Back, and I love everything with Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi. That's like one of my favorite sequences of all time in any Star Wars movie. But I think, honestly, that Star Wars can be a little bit boring at times, especially like the beginning. You're just following the droids around, like who cares? This you have like lightsaber battles and space battles, and it's all cool. Like I'm digging it.
Yeah, there's something about that first Star Wars where it doesn't feel like a complete movie to me, and I couldn't imagine being in the theaters and like seeing that story and be like, wait, that's it? I don't know. It just cuts off way too soon, or there's something.
Let's get to our ratings of Return of the Jedi. And this might be, again, a rehash of what we've said already, but what is a rating scale for this movie, J.A.?
Oh, well, it's got to be murder bears. We had murder droids, and then we have murder bears.
That's true. That is true. They're adorable. I had one growing up. I had a Wicket. It was quite nice, actually. But yeah, I think I'll go first. I'm going to give this a 4. Because basically I give all of the Star Wars original trilogies 4s. They are 3 of the greatest movies of all time. I think that all 3 of the Star Wars movies are in my top 10, that with Raiders of the Lost Ark and the original Godfather, and then Duck Soup. I think those make up, like, basically my favorite movies of all time. Maybe Outlaw Josie Wales, maybe A Magnificent Seven, but that's pretty much it. So to have all 3, it's a 4. You can say it's repetitive or whatever. It's still the best of the Star Wars' out there.
You like it even more than Empire?
Well, Empire's a 4 too. Like, I'm not going to say it's better than Empire's the best, right. But I'm not going to say.
Well, you just said it was the best of the Star Wars.
Yeah, like the best of the Star Wars is that those 3 movies. That's the best of the Star Wars.
The original trilogies.
Yeah, the original trilogy.
He's lumping it all in, and it's
combining.
Now yes. It's a retrospective ranking because it's not ranking the movies based on sort of the 3, where do you put it? Or just in itself? He's saying, as part of that original trilogy whole, now that we have this much larger Star Wars universe, they stand on the pedestal.
Yes. Do you agree with that?
And I agree with your assessment of that sort of looking at the original three in that respect. It's not as good as Empire. I don't even think it's as good as the original Star Wars. That being said, to go back to that whole conversation we had of unaltered trilogy versus special edition versus Harmy's despecialized edition versus the now 4K 83, which if you can find that, that's probably the way I would recommend watching it. The reason why there's all of this, all these people trying to restore and fix and remaster this, is because they're trying to capture that moment, that je ne sais quoi they had when they saw the movie in the movie theater for the first time or the second time or the third time or the fourth time in 1983. With Snai Snoodles singing Leptenek and bouncing around as a puppet instead of the horrible CGI Jedi rocks. With the ending and Yub Nub, see it warts and all, cry when the one Ewok dies, jump for joy when the entire battalion of stormtroopers go down like the punks they are. Enjoy the character arc that is actually quite moving with Luke saving Darth Vader and returning him to the Force, and that epic lightsaber battle. To me, still the greatest saber battle ever recorded on film for Star Wars. Even better than any of the new stuff. Even better than Duel of the Fates.
All right, Chad, you're up.
Yeah, so I don't worship in the altar of Star Wars. I think they're good movies, but I do see Jay's point where they've been messed with a little too much, where it's no longer a pure experience. And this movie, like I said, it reveals the warts of a franchise that just is a nostalgia machine. Everybody worships the first trilogy, but even in this third movie, they're already recycling ideas. They're already going back, and it's like, oh. And there are parts of this, like with Luke, I don't know if I like super confident Luke. He goes from being real whiny in the first movie to being like, I don't know, just talking a Jabba. Like, it was off for me. But like I said, I enjoyed it. For my 2 hours that I watched it, it was fun. I think the further you get away from George Lucas as a storyteller, the better the movies are, and that's why Empire is such better than the other two in the original trilogy and way better than the prequels. But in this one, you could see George Lucas's hands all through it, and George Lucas's hands coming back and messing with it even more. So, I'm going to go with 3 Murder Bears.
Okay, so Mikey, what's your rating for Return of the Jedi?
Oh, I mean, Return of the Jedi is it's not the best of the original 3, but it's still quite wonderful. So I'm going to give it a strong 3. The redemption story arc, I like when you get zapped and you could see his skull in the helmet. That was pretty cool. It just worked really well, and that's from 10-year-old me and almost 50-year-old me next month.
Wow. We should have an anniversary show just for you, buddy.
I'm older than Ian McDiarmid was when he played Palpatine.
Well, and you're much better looking, too. I'll say that much.
I don't have much kinder.
Well, we'll be right back with more of The Last Comic Shop right after these commercial breaks. We're going to have some recommendations, so stick around for that.
Hey everyone, Brian Thomas here from the former The Batman vs. James Bond show and the upcoming The Night Cave show. Do you like noir, black and white gritty murder mysteries? Do you like crime stories or even pulp comics? Then you're gonna love Nick Palatichuk's debut graphic novel entitled The Greenway. It's 1968, and Butch Schultz, a black market merchant, finds that his friend has been murdered in a mansion in St. Paul. Now he is out looking for who did it, while the city's best detectives are on the case. Nick's graphic novel is already getting rave reviews, let me tell you. Zero Supervision Comics podcast says, a dark, intriguing story that makes you want to know more. The Glenn Thinks Stuff podcast says, it's explosive, captivating, and alluring. And actor Kyle Hester from The Chair, Zombie with a Shotgun, and Preacher 6 says, can't wait for this book. You gotta get on this. Order your copy today at Indie Planet, A New World of Comics. That's www.indieplanet.com. Hard copies and digital copies are available, and now digital copies are only $5. That's where I said it, just $5. So make sure you order yours today.
All right, we're back back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for recommendations. Yes, that time of every single show where we stop talking about Star Wars for just a little bit so that we can give you potentially other comic books. Maybe they'll be Star Wars related. Who knows? But at least mine's not. That you can pick up at your local comic book shop. In addition to the Darth Vader series, which I think not only can you get in trades and issues, I think it's also in omnibus now, which is pretty cool. Pick up that one. Pick up the Jason Aaron omnibus while you're at it. Put those both on your bookshelf. Vader Down actually does cross over between the two, which is awesome. Some of the best Star Wars out there. But yes,
Vader's got that line in that book where he says, "All I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men." Vader, put down your weapons. You're surrounded. And he's like, "Oh yeah."
It is good.
Great.
It is good. Put them on your shelf if you are a Star Wars fan. But put these other things on your shelf as well. And we're going to start off with Mikey Wood. So, Mikey, what do you got for recommendations this week?
You know what? I'm actually going to recommend a bunch of books. Ooh. If one is able to, I highly and it is Star Wars related. I highly recommend that one purchases via either eBay or Amazon. I believe they're still in some form of print. Any and all of the Art of Star Wars books. The Art of Star Wars, The Art of A New Hope, The Art of Empire Strikes Back, The Art of Return of the Jedi, The Art of the... all the way down the line. They even have The Art of Galaxy's Edge and The Art of Star Wars Visions and 2 volumes of The Art of Mandalorian. Books of production artwork. All of the design elements that went into the making of these films. And the early ones are hilarious because they're like really, I mean, you've got Ralph McQuarrie's beautiful paintings and everything, but you've also got really simple pen sketches from the costumers and things like that, like just wonderful. And you could see the advancement of the technology of production art. And you can see all of these fabulous things that they chose not to use. And you'll think to yourself, why didn't they use that? And, it's just an incredible experience, and I highly recommend them. And hardcover and softcover, just really, really, really cool stuff.
I remember you brought up Ralph McQuarrie. I remember when they made action figures of his original designs.
Yes.
And they were like Toys R Us exclusives. You could buy the collections in there. But they look so cool. They were so much more Flash Gordon.
Very much so. And I mean, that's from the Star Wars that we all struggle through.
Let's not talk about that. That is not a recommendation.
But a lot of the Rebels cartoon actually used McQuarrie designs that they abandoned from the first era.
Yeah.
And it's just they're so fabulous, these books. But anyway.
All right. Well, if we're not recommending that book, Chad, what are we recommending from you?
As we've alluded to, I'm not the biggest Star Wars guy out there. I like the movies and stuff just fine, but I worry that sometimes some of those Star Wars fans are just the worst.
We are.
Yeah, no, what they did to the Kelly Tran and Jar Jar, who I really wish they would have brought Jar Jar back as a Sith Lord instead. No, he's a new Jedi, whatever. But anywho, so I'm going to go off the beaten path, much like Star Wars folks, fall into Star Wars and they love all the little minutia and all the other stuff. I stumbled onto a book one day at Ollie's. Good stuff, cheap. I love Ollie's. But it was called Bix. But it's mostly wordless, except for in the middle, there's a couple scenes with his wife where they're talking about things. But it is about Leon Bix Beiderbecke. And I hope I'm saying that name correctly. He was a jazz soloist in the 1920s who ended up working with people like Louis Armstrong. He suffered from alcoholism, and it shows his decline, and gets, you have these incredible jazz scenes in certain parts, and then in other parts you see him hallucinating things and getting the tremors and all that kind of stuff. But it was such a well-crafted read. It was all done by a gentleman named Scott Chandler, mostly black and white, but it was just such an experience. And after I was done, I fell into this rabbit hole of listening to Bix Bickerby's 1920 jazz music, and that's all I did for 2 weeks straight. It brought me the same level of joy as talking about Super TIE Fighters brings to Star Wars nerds. but yeah, so my recommendation is that Bix book by Scott Chandler. It's just so great.
Well, I'm gonna have to check that out. And now something else that you should check out if you're into the whole space epics, yet you don't want to get more Star Wars, go back to Marvel, because Marvel has a lot of space epics that don't involve galaxies far, far away, but involve galaxies within the 616. And we're talking about one of the first major space battle stories in Marvel continuity, and that is the Kree-Skrull War. Yes, those issues of Avengers starting with Avengers 89 all the way through 97. This was written all by Roy Thomas in the early 70s. Artwork by the wonderful John Buscema, by Neil Adams, Sal Buscema. Current comic book fans might cry about the fact that actually the Skrulls and the Kree barely fight in this, but that's actually the point for me. It's the fact that, like, the Avengers and Earth are so on the peripheral of anything going on in the space cosmic side of Marvel at this point that, like, nobody would care what was going on Earth. They would just be like the Aleutians in World War II. They're just an island chain. It's a battlefield, but it's not minor battlefield. So you don't really get so much space battles, although the Avengers eventually go into space for a little while. But what you do get are some really great issues by Neil Adams. Again, you get that issue where Ant-Man goes into the Vision's body to save his life or something. It's just wonderful stuff. Some of the best Neil Adams is still some of that early Neil Adams when he just kind of blew the lid off of everything that was going on in comic books at the time with those layouts. And you can get all of this now in a huge, nicely bound gallery edition that just came out in comic book shops about 2 months ago. So make sure that you're picking up the Kree-Skrull War Avengers in that gallery edition. It's also got some nice extras, some original pencil work and original designs from Neil Adams and John Buscema and Sal Buscema. So just a really nice way of, again, repackaging one of my favorite stories in Marvel continuity. Anyways, J.A., what is your recommendation this week?
I am recommending more Vader. That is right. Ooh. Star Wars Darth Vader and the Lost Command. Now, this is Legends.
So this was the Dark Horse that Disney decided, we're not going to count that.
Yeah. This came out in 2015. It is not dissimilar to the book that we just read in that it takes place after a massive event, this event being the death of Padme and the creation of Darth Vader. So he is tasked on a mission to locate a lost Imperial expeditionary force that has been led by Tarkin's son. And he goes off and he has to go into this nebula to find Tarkin's son, but it's also setting up that Tarkin is rising in the eyes of the Empire, and there's sort of this Tarkin versus Vader for, supremacy within the Empire. And he's got traitors on his ship that are reporting to Tarkin and trying to do him wrong, and he's trying to figure this all out, and there's this quasi-religious lady, Sorrow, that's around. It's a great story. It's one that's told back when writers had a lot more carte blanche of what they could do with the Star Wars franchise, which I think has been lost a bit now that Lucasfilm has this sort of map of, where you can go with Star Wars. It means that there's not as much continuity errors, but it also means that writers sometimes, I think, get a little bit pigeonholed and they can't explore fun, exciting things that have nothing to do with canon.
Very cool.
So again, Star Wars, Darth Vader, and the Lost Command by W. Hayden Blackman and Sunio Sanda. Marvel puts it out as a trade. You can get it on Comixology. Again, it's Star Wars Legends at the moment. So.
I'm going to check out that book for sure. And I hope that you check out a lot of other books over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. We don't have books there, but we got tons of book reviews because every single week on this program, you get another one. And we've got over 100 episodes available in Evergreen for your downloading pleasure. Just rate, review, and subscribe on any of those podcasting platforms. And you too can listen to tons of our great comic book talk.
And if you need things to keep your comic books safe, head on over to bcwsupplies.com. You can find long boxes and short boxes and bags and boards and those wonderful self-adhesive bags that are the best because you don't have to use tape. Or if you want to use tape, get the ones that need tape. You can get all of that. And you can get a wonderful 10% off your total by using our special promo code, which is LCSPOD, and that's at bcwsupplies.com.
And you can always find us on the social medias. We are on places like Twitter and Instagram and Tickety Talks and Spoutable and Hive. We have an account on Hive. I don't update it.
Do we have the Mastodon yet?
No, I got a soft ban from that one. Sorry. There were sign-up issues. It was very complicated.
Just want someplace where we can promote our podcast, right? Like, I don't know how this became so complicated.
Anyway, wherever you go, look at Last Comic Shop, and we'll give you links where they can find what else, J.A.?
We have a link to our merch store. You can get t-shirts, coffee mugs, tote bags. This week, a special on Endor Forest ponchos.
Everybody have their special poncho.
Yeah, remember that, because the Last Comic Shop, we don't give up our merch rights. We learned that from George Lucas. That's how you make your real dollars. On the merch.
That's where Kenner screwed the pooch. They had, like, the best deal ever. All they had to do was make, 1,000 little plastic toys, and they would have kept that licensing forever.
How many were they short of?
Well, they just stopped. They stopped making them for a couple of years, and then they lost the license. The license went out. Hasbro, I think, ended up buying it back when Hasbro got Kenner. But it's a really interesting story. I think there's a couple of documentaries that talk about it. One on Netflix saying the toys that made us, I think, goes into it a bit.
There you go. I'm still bitter that Lucas wouldn't let Mel Brooks make Spaceballs toys.
Aww.
And so, while we love being the last comic shop podcast you need, we don't actually want to be the last comic shop. So we encourage everybody, go out to those shops near you. Go to www.comicshoplocator.com. You can find a place near you where you can get things like the Star Wars Darth Vader book we talked about. You could get all the other books we recommended this week. I don't have time to list them all. We're running out of time. Got to get moving. All right, Andy, do your thing.
All right. And we hope that also you're tuning in on May the 20th for our segment on the live stream for The Cure. You may or may not know that we are, again, a part of that wonderful event to help raise money for cancer research. We're going to be reviewing a bonus comic book from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're around a computer or a smart device or anything that you can, log into their website and check it out, make sure that you do and bring your checkbook so that you can help donate to this very, very worthy cause.
That's right. It's a live interactive show. So if you ever wanted to ask us questions mid-show, try and throw us off, you can do that. And in the process, you can donate for a wonderful cause to help raise funds for cancer research. So help us do good things by doing good things, and all the good things will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. We might be even giving away a free t-shirt or 2 or 3 to those people that donate, open up those pocketbooks. Okay. Free t-shirts from the Last Comic Shop.
Slow it down, Andrew.
That sweet logo from Mikey Wood. Oh, yeah. Get some artwork.
And J.A.,
yes, that's true.
Yeah, let's not forget that.
But in any case, we hope that you come back to the Last Comic Shop at our regular time next week. We're going to be reviewing the new Guardian of the Galaxy movie to continue our movie mayhem. Until next week, I was the host with the most, Andy Larson. I was joined by Chad Smith, J.A. Scott, and the wonderful Mikey Wood. And we hope that you stay safe.
And may the Force be with y'all.
Yeah, yes, exactly. May the Force be with you always, and also with you.
You were on fire and also dead.
That's right. That's right.
So in all the special editions, and all the edits, and all the changes George Lucas made to Return of the Jedi, Boba Fett still goes out like a jobber.
He goes out like a punk.
The Last Comic Shop was a 2023 Black Angus production.